Good for him. Yeah, exactly. You're like 2017 call, bro.
Yeah.
He does. That's no problem. So good. We're all at this calm understanding that at the beginning of the war, Lincoln's real purpose is union. Now, who is this going to piss off?
The Deep South.
Why? He tells the Deep South, I have no intention or desire, nor do I think I have the power to interfere with slavery where it exists.
Isn't the South democratic?
Yes, but he says, I don't want to mess with it where it is. Talk to me.
So would the radical Republicans or like his main party like dislike him for that?
We talked about those 4 political factions yesterday, yes?
Yeah.
The moderate Republicans and the war Democrats are like, cool, this works. That's fine, let's fight the war for union. So the branch that's going to be most upset is the radical Republicans, because they prefer abolition, and the peace Democrats, because they're like, just let the South bounce. We don't need them. We're better off without them. If they want slavery this bad, they can go do their thing. So keep in mind that he's, with this idea of union, he's making 2 factions mad on opposite ends of the political spectrum. The aggressive abolitionist Republicans and those peace Democrats who think that fighting the Civil War for any reason is not worth it. We don't need a Civil War. If they want to secede, they're going to profess that compact theory. States can secede if they feel like it. Good. So we got a big day today. We're not quite going to kill Lincoln, but that's coming soon. Don't worry. I'm sure you're disappointed. I know. Spoiler alert, he dies. But we're going to get all the way today to his second inaugural address. So we talked about his first to start with today. We're going to get all the way to the second inaugural address for the end point of today. To talk about how the war aim evolves. How the objective and the goal and the mission and the purpose and what the war is being fought for, how that's going to evolve over time. And this is probably the only time in APUSH history that we'll actually spend a little bit of time on military developments, not because they matter militarily, but because in the Civil War, more than any other conflict in American history, military developments impact political developments. As things change, because we're fighting ourselves, as things change militarily, so too will political and social developments go hand in hand. And that's kind of the thing when you're fighting to keep your country together, is everything is part of the war. Elections are part of the war. Decisions are part of the war. Military acts are part of the economic and political fabric of society. So because the Civil War is unique, we'll look at a couple key battles today. Of course, because they matter militarily, but because they lead directly to political effect. All right, if you guys go back in time, I asked you to remember one battle in the Revolutionary War. I only asked you to remember one. In the Revolutionary War. Ruby, what was it? Battle of Saratoga. Why that one, Ruby?
Because that was the one that the French decided to help the North.
The North.
Not the North.
Yeah.
Yeah, the colony.
So you're saying that I asked you to remember that battle because it had political ramifications. What? Wild. I didn't ask you to remember all these other crazy battles that matter to the military history, but not to the broader history. In the War of 1812, I asked you to remember 2 battles, not because they mattered militarily, but because they mattered politically. Both of these battles gave us presidents. Battle of New Orleans, our famous favorites. And Jackson, he becomes a war hero because the British forgot their ladders. And he becomes president based on that reputation. And the Battle of
Saratoga.
Tippecanoe. Because the Whigs use William Henry Harrison's war record to run him as a war hero for president. So in that war as well, it's only 2 battles because they impact political developments. Now in the Civil War, same idea. We're going to talk about a couple battles because they're going to impact political developments. The key concepts are here. They're long. They're up here just for reference. But the big thing I want to point out to you is the idea that over time, we talked about this on Monday, it's the North's manpower and resources that win the war. We talked about that on Monday. Over time, it's the fact that what does the North have more of than the South from Monday's conversation?
Cotton.
Men.
Cotton.
Population.
Cotton.
We don't have more cotton in the South. Pillow fight.
In the South?
What does the North have more of?
Industry.
Yeah. Technology, infrastructure, railroads, factories, men, immigrants. Yeah. Horses. What does this outline more of though? Oh yeah, they got more donkeys.
Cotton.
Valiantly riding their donkeys into battle to throw cotton balls. But it's this point here that the Union and Confederacy are going to mobilize society. That it's not just a war of military, it's a war of society. The big picture for today is in B and C, which argue that it's this evolution of slavery during the war by Lincoln, and it's Lincoln's attempt to reframe the purpose of the war through things like the Emancipation Proclamation and the Gettysburg Address, both of which we'll read today, which kind of change the why. That's important, the why we're fighting. It changes from a war just for Union over time, as military events change it, into a war for something greater than just Union. And that's what the big takeaway for you guys today. So your prompt is here. Benjamin, can you read for me, please?
Evaluate the extent to which military action and administrative political change in the Civil War.
Cool. So that's what I'm asking you. It's how do the military events change things on the political front? The political front. So we have 4 important key texts that we're going to read today. The first is a text I've never used in class before, but I came across it in some research I was doing, and I'm really excited about it. I even pointed out to Dr. Thompson that I was excited about it, because I get excited about these things, because I'm a giant nerd, and that's okay. Yeah, but you guys are the ones that laughed in my head reclaim me on Saturday. So. who's the nerd now? Both of us. We're all nerds together. You didn't get it?
No, like, you didn't say that.
Oh, I usually didn't get it. Yeah, I took you off the email list. So we'll read a view that Douglass identifies a huge... No, you put your email in wrong for the test. That's fine. Yeah. Douglass identifies a huge problem that he finds with Lincoln's war strategy of Union. We'll look at the Emancipation Proclamation, which is a huge document in terms of the evolution of slavery in America. We'll look at the Gettysburg Address. And you'll watch a short video clip on this from a really good documentary series called The Civil War. It's pretty accurately named. And then we'll finally end today textually with Lincoln's second inaugural and kind of compare that to the theme and purpose of the first to show how this has changed over time. Highlighters? Good. So, as we get into this conversation of Civil War, it's important that I show you this map from the get-go. So this map's going to show the entire Confederacy, and it's going to show Union gains. What happens with the Union military over time? Purple being 1861 as the war begins, blue being 1862, and so forth. So take a minute, absorb this map with your partner. Again, we can teach a whole class with just maps, always, because they tell us an entire story that doesn't need words. What can we learn from this map? What is this map demonstrating about the Civil War? What's noteworthy about this map as a text? Take a minute, chat it out, go for it.
I see that they got the pretty good right there, right? And it took them a while to get the capital.
Yeah.
Okay, that's important. Good, good. Told you I'll go someday. It took us 5 years to get all that. Yeah, you tried that.
No.
That's important, good. That's important. That's important. I hear you guys. Yeah, all right. I heard some good stuff. Chavez, I heard you make an interesting proclamation of surprise. What you got from the kid?
I said that they got a lot of that pretty quickly. 5 years, they got all that.
Yeah. In 5 years, but if you think about it, 5 years is also a long time.
Not just a war.
Okay, fair. No, what do you think?
They got the coastal states pretty quickly.
Okay, some coastal port territory pretty quickly. Good. Go ahead.
Through the Mississippi River.
The Mississippi River pretty quickly, or at least over a little bit of time. That's important. What is this map demonstrating that's working or not working?
Their tactics.
What?
Their tactics.
Be a little more specific.
You remember that snake?
I do remember it because I put it on the board.
Oh, yeah.
What's that called?
The Anaconda.
Good, the Anaconda plan, that over time we're going to gradually choke in the South by, first, to your point, controlling the shipping in the ports on the outside. Second, eventually capturing the capital of the Confederacy, Richmond. And of course, splitting the Confederacy in two by controlling the Mississippi River. So all of you guys, I heard in conversation, unwittingly identified this aspects of the Anaconda plan. But it takes a long time. And that's going to factor into political developments as well. As people get a little impatient with the war, we'll get there. So the war is really fought in two places. The vast majority of the war takes place in this white box. It's fun. The vast majority of the war takes place in between Washington, D.C. and Richmond, the two capitals. But that's what happens when you have both capitals of both nations only a few hundred miles apart.
You said an hour away, right?
Yeah. I spent a week in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is here. It's where the University of Virginia is, founded by our good friend, Thomas Jefferson. And I flew into Washington, D.C., rented a car, drove to Richmond, saw some Civil War stuff in Richmond, and then drove to Charlottesville, and I was there like 2.5 hours later. So all of the Civil War, basically, not all, but a vast majority of the Civil War happened in that short drive that I took in 2017 in the summer, which is kind of crazy to think about what that meant at the time, in terms of carnage, in terms of what society has to live through, in terms of a lot of dead bodies. There's a lot of times when a Civil War battle takes place where another Civil War battle recently was fought, and then it rains and all the buried bodies come up, and it's terrible and disgusting, and it smells real nice.
For real?
Yeah.
It actually happened.
Oh yeah, all over the place. How? Well, you see, when you don't bury somebody that deep, and then it rains and the dirt settles, and then there all of a sudden you see a nose, and you're like, oh. So no, there's no time for coffins when you got tens of thousands of people dying like that. All the woods being spent on wagons for the war and the like. So there's the Eastern Theater. We'll talk about a little bit today. The rest of the war is going to take place in what's called the Western Theater, and it's a bigger space, but it really does focus not on the two capitals, but on the Mississippi River, to your point. Good. Good, good, good. So there's a better example that identifies some of the battles themselves. Again, we're not going to focus too much militarily unless this really interests you. If you like Civil War military development, that's fine. When should you ask about it? Yeah, today after school. Absolutely. Be happy to talk about it. So I just want to point out there's Fort Sumter. I always think about it on Monday as that starting point of the war. And then all this other stuff we're going to talk about today happens in this box. And the other stuff we'll talk about today, mostly Vicksburg, happens in this box. So it's important that you guys get your geographic heads around the way in which the Civil War is going to impact politics, because it's all happening in people's front yards and backyards, which is a little bit insane. A little bit insane. Yes, sir.
So the three most important.
Louder.
The three most important like battles fought was it Vicksburg, Shiloh, and Fort Henry, and Fort Donos?
No, not quite. Not for military purposes, yes. Politically, no. So the ones we'll talk about today, because they are turning point battles, are Bull Run as the first one that really gets the war going, but lets the world know that it's not going to be a very quick war. And then Antietam, Vicksburg, and Gettysburg. Antietam, Vicksburg, and Gettysburg. Now, the first battle of Bull Run is important for a couple of reasons. But the real reason is it happens right outside of Washington, D.C., and everybody thinks the war is going to be over within 2 or 3 months. Let's go back to our map. Is the battle over in 2 or 3 months? No. No, we go for 4 years. So it's important that we understand that I find this enjoyable because people from Washington, D.C., the capital, they head out to watch the battle with their picnic baskets. They think it's going to be an enjoyable time. They think it's going to be a lot of fun. They're going to see the U.S. Army take care of business, and then it's a disaster. The Confederate Army quickly overwhelms the Union forces. They push them back almost into the actual capital of Washington, D.C. All these people with their picnic baskets have to run out of the way. It is an unmitigated, full-on disaster. But what it demonstrates, why it matters, is that the war is not going to be quick or pretty. This is the first real war post-Margaret Revolution. It's an uglier war. It's a deadlier war because we've advanced our technology. We've advanced our industry. And because of these advancements, The war isn't quite the old style pretty war of Revolutionary era in which you put on your shiny uniforms, you march out, you stand in a column, and then it doesn't work like that. So the Confederacy wins this first battle, and there are some that argue that the Confederacy could have won the war on the spot. What if? At the first couple of battles, I'll talk to you about what's called what-if history. What if the Confederacy had continued pushing the army all the way into the capital? What if? What if? What if, instead of just stopping and letting them retreat, what if they followed them into Washington, D.C. and ended the war right there? What happens if the Confederacy takes Washington, D.C.? Is the war over?
Yeah.
Basically. The Confederacy instead does not pursue them, does not follow them into the capital, and both sides live to fight another day. But there are some historians that argue that the war could have been over right then, and we would have had the Confederate States of America as a full independent country. Wild. Now, shortly after, I'll go back to the map here, because it's another what-if piece. Shortly after, there's Bull Run. As you can see, there's Bull Run, and there's Washington, D.C. They're not far apart. Shortly after, General George McClellan, who's a name to remember for the rest of today, counterattacks down the peninsula, close to where Jamestown is actually, in Virginia, and could have very well taken the Richmond capital. McClellan, as a northern Union general, invades with his forces down south of Richmond. They have a clear path to Richmond. Richmond, of course, is the Confederate capital. And had McClellan been a little bit more aggressive, the Northern Army would have invaded the Southern capital 6 months into the war, and then what happens? Yeah, war's over. But General George McClellan is notoriously careful. He is a terrible general. He stops this time because he says his horses need more rest. His horses are tired. I mean, it's good that he cares about animals. I support that, you know. But Lincoln writes him back and says, tired from what? You haven't done anything yet. McClellan is a notorious over-planner. He's meticulous. He's worried. He thinks the other side has more men than they do. He gets nervous. He gets scared. They wait a couple extra days. And then when they finally invade, it's too late. The South's forces know they're coming, and the battle itself is an absolute disaster. So look at the quote I have of McClellan's there. It's on the board as well. Take a minute. What does this quote reveal about McClellan's war strategy, and how does that then impact the developments that come because of it? Have a minute, chat about it, talk to your partner. Yeah, what does this reveal, and why does this matter?
So he'd rather be ready than was this not working or was it okay?
I'm tired.
Okay, that's not good. He'd second guess things. Yeah.
All right, let me stop you guys there. I asked for one thing, and it was to avoid side conversation things with a lot to get to. And now you're talking about following up on Saturday and how Luis is not down. Now, Caesar, talk to me. What is this quote revealing about McClellan?
What me and Christoph discussed is that he's saying that they won't move into the, to attack the Confederacy until their forces are, strong enough to do so.
Good, good. Kat, build on that, please. Thank you for volunteering. Yeah, he's a perfectionist. He doesn't take risks. Absolutely. Let me tell you a little more that we can't read into this quote. McClellan is a Democrat. McClellan is pro-slavery. So there are some that argue that McClellan's big fear is using the Union Army to end slavery. So there's some legitimate historians that look into his hesitancy and say the reason he's so hesitant is because he wants to find a way to force the South back into the Union without being too violent to the South. Interesting. There are some that argue that he lets his pro-slavery views impact his military decisions. Again, when you're fighting a civil war, my point being all these things are integrated. And because of that, he doesn't use the army to its full capacity in instances like this. There's a reason that in 3 years he's going to run against Lincoln for president after Lincoln has fired him twice. And he's going to run on this platform, which we'll get to today, of just ending the war, peaceful secession, let them go. So like, if you tie all these things together with this perspective on the war, I think it paints an early picture as to why the Union struggles at the outset of the war. So the Peninsula Campaign, as it's called, is a loss, again, for the Union. Now McClellan's 0 for 2. Good start. Because he's too cautious. He's too cautious. He does not seize or take over Richmond, the capital. He withdraws in an embarrassing withdrawal from the Virginia Peninsula. And Lincoln fires him for the first time. It's a temporary firing. You're fired for the short term. You're suspended. And the only reason Lincoln doesn't replace him is because Lincoln doesn't know anybody who's even better. The Union is struggling for military leadership. They've obviously lost a couple of early battles. It does not look like people hoped it would look. And socially and politically, there's some clear significance. Let me ask you a question, though. I want you to talk about it with your partner for a minute. It was in your reading as well. What happens if, I'm going to give you a minute to discuss this. There's some important things we should glean from this that matter for the rest of instruction today. What happens if, I don't usually play what if history, but it's kind of fun once in a while. If McClellan is able to take Richmond in 1862, what happens if? Josue already said the war's over. Cool. What else? Take a minute, talk about it. What do you guys got? What happens if McClellan takes Richmond? Chat it out. What happens if...
What else is what is
Good.
What happens is that
Wow. I'm hearing good language to it. Radical Republican.
You should have sent George Washington this Mister, why didn't they send George Washington?
What?
Why didn't they send George Washington?
On his horse?
Yeah.
He's dead.
With his military uniform.
That's your time. I heard some good conversation. I heard some real good conversation. Benjamin, I'll pick on you. What happens if?
I said that slavery would end.
It would?
Yeah.
Why do you think?
Because Lincoln is well, not right now, but he's going to be anti-slavery.
But at this time, has he expressed those views yet?
No.
What text do we have to go from at this point of Lincoln's? And that other text that I showed you guys last week at the beginning of class, on Monday, said if I could save the Union by freeing what? All or none, or some. Interesting. So maybe we end slavery next, but maybe not. Josue, what do you think?
I said that since you said that McClellan was pro-slavery, so obviously they would have won the war and he would have gotten more like popularity.
Oh, he would have been more popular,
So
absolutely.
in the next election he would have won, and then he would have kept slavery even though the Union won.
It's a compelling argument. Talk to me.
I think I would disagree with that because you said that McClellan was pro-slavery. So he's good as a traitor by himself because he's fighting against them.
Oh, okay. That's a compelling argument that McClellan is he's pro-states' rights and therefore pro-slave. Okay, go ahead.
If they would have succeeded in seizing Richmond, they probably would have stopped the secession of the South earlier than.
Sure. So the war ends quickly, but has our war aim changed to address slavery yet? No. So we don't know the answer to the question. So none of you are wrong, fortunately. None of you are right, as usual. So the real thing I want you guys to get your mind around is this idea of contingency in history. It's impossible to play the what-if game, but it can be fun sometimes. Then in this case, we don't know what would have happened if, but what we do know comes off of Lincoln's text in which he has said multiple times in public and in private. That letter about all the slaves, none of the slaves, that's a private letter to Horace Greeley. The first inaugural, that's a public document. In both cases, he makes it very clear that his first, second, and third priority is what in one word?
Union.
Good. Good. So if we had attacked Richmond and ended the war then, could Union have been achieved? Yeah. So, according to Lincoln, mission accomplished. So it's fun that we have to understand this at the beginning, and the way that the war extending actually makes it a more social significant war as opposed to just a militarily significant war. Here's my map. That's what I'm talking about. So here's Washington. This is my point about how close they are. Here's Washington, D.C. There's Richmond. There's our favorite, the Chesapeake Bay, which we talked about for weeks in period 2. The Chesapeake region. And here's Jamestown. Right here. There's the James River. Oh, what do you know? Richmond is on the James River of Jamestown. So McClellan drops his forces in below Richmond. Very smart. It's a very intelligent move. And tries to come up the peninsula at Richmond because all the troops are here to attack D.C. Because he takes so long, all the troops are able to come down and block his path and embarrass him in front of everybody, all his friends. It's terrible. It's not good to lose a battle and then get fired. So this hesitancy from a clear path to Richmond to a blocked path to Richmond is going to actually extend the war 3 more years. Sometimes military and tens of thousands more lives. But now the war eventually will evolve to be a war about slavery as well. So there are those that say that, yes, you're right, McClellan's inaction does cost people their lives. But then long term, it does save people their lives. But again, contingency. What if? We don't know. We don't know. So make sure you get that question answered. What was the significance of this Peninsula Campaign? Militarily, McClellan lost. He gets fired. But socially, the war gets prolonged so that we can evolve our social view of the war. Politically, Lincoln is in some trouble because his military keeps losing their wars, their battles. All right, now on to our first text of the day. And again, this is the text I'm pretty happy about. Anytime I can put Frederick Douglass in front of you is a good day. And this is a text from Douglass that I think gives us really good insight into the radical Republican view of the war. So, 1862. How far into the war are we at this time? 1 year. Good, because Lincoln's elected in 60, but he takes office in 61 for subject. So we're 1 year into the war, and Douglass is mad. Based on what we've already talked about, why might Douglass be mad? What's up? No, that's not why he's mad at all. Why would Frederick Douglass be mad as a radical Republican? Talk to me.
The fact that it's solely a Union plus instead of
Yeah. Yeah. The fact that we have this awesome opportunity to end slavery and we've done nothing about it. Now think about Lincoln's position though. What does Lincoln really need to win this war? Public support where? In the border states. So Lincoln has this rock and a hard place situation. Like, yes, it would be a good thing to end slavery, but I need these border states that own slaves to not leave either. So I don't know what to do. Typical American, he's going to do nothing about his problem. So Douglass is going to publish this fantastic article. This is just an excerpt from it, in which he kind of goes all in on criticizing Lincoln and the South and America as a whole. So I'm going to have you read just this first paragraph until where it says, stop. Good, good. And tell me, how is he characterizing the Confederacy's actions? What is he pointing out about what the Confederacy does? How does he portray the Confederacy? I'm going to give you 3. I'm going to let you talk about it, and then we're going to have a quick discussion before we go further into the text. 3 minutes, you're reading. about a minute 50 left. How is he characterizing the South? What's he pointing out about the South? How is he trying to make them look? Okay. Not wrong. Forty seconds. Seconds. Those last thoughts out. I like it. I like it. All right. Take a whole minute. Not a part minute, a whole minute. Have a discussion, guys. How is he characterizing the South? What is he doing to Southern society? 1 minute, go for it. Chat me out. Give me good answers. Yeah, well, good. I'll be alright. Just vitamin C. I've never missed a day of work sick in my life. Yeah, never happened. Been working for 16 years. You learned something yet? No? You learned something yet?
Yes. I didn't know that they were like more practical. They were four facets of the.
Or the war could have ended in 62?
Yeah. So they could like, or like, why would he care about
All right. So, I'm going to start with Christoph because you volunteered, and then Ashley, you can build on it. So, Christoph, go for it. Thank you for the volunteer. I like that hand up.
He's just basically calling them like backstabbers. Like, so he's saying like all the bad things they've done, even though they've sworn that they wouldn't do that, and that they'll protect the like that they'll defend and support the Constitution, even though they went against it.
Okay. Sure. Agreed. Agreed. Ash, build on that. Good word. Good word. Absolutely. So they violated their oath to the Constitution? Good. No way, Bill, please.
I thought that they were disruptive to the American government and they took land from America and like they're basically trading.
Yeah. Yeah. All this and more has been done by the very man whom you've honored, paid, and trusted, while they were sworn to protect. Thank you for the hand up. Talk to me.
To add on to what everybody else said, the U.S. has allowed this to happen.
Boom. How so?
By doing nothing, basically, to stop it.
What has the U.S. done in the last 40 years to allow this to happen?
Ignore slavery.
Ignore slavery. Good. What else? Yeah. Talk to me about what society as a whole, other than ignore slavery, has done at every turn the last 40 years to allow this to happen. It's a hard question. Hang on. Think for a second. What has society done for 40 plus years, really, that has allowed the South to do things like this? It's a hard question. Johnny, what do you think? What have we done for all these years that's allowed this situation to happen?
What I was thinking would be like sectionism, like they were like starting to like separate each other like into different societies, so that like every time they pass laws or like taxes, they mostly use it to like benefit one side and not both, so like it caused tension from there.
Good, good, very, very accurate. Talk to me.
Having different interpretations on Constitution.
Sure, different interpretations exist in the Constitution. Agreed. Chavez. Compromises. We're always looking to make the South happy. So even if it violates public opinion, at every turn, we're doing things like, oh yeah, you're right. Like, yeah, most of society does want California as a free state, but don't worry, South, we'll give what you want to. So in a sense, the South has now become like a petulant child who's always used to getting what they want. And now when they finally don't, yeah, raise your hand, just like you. So now when the South doesn't get what they want, they take their ball and go home. They've left the country. They've done all these things Douglass identifies. Yes? Good. So, turn your page, please. Turn your page, please. And this text, I don't want you to rush through this text, because this text has a lot to chew on. A lot, and that's okay. Usually we read quickly. Today we're going to slow it down just a bit for this text, because Douglass is going to point out a lot of things that are really beneficial to us. So I'm going to have you read just halfway down where it says next. Halfway down, 2 paragraphs in, where it's actually just one long paragraph about next. And then you answer that first question. How does Lincoln characterize Lincoln's and Davis's actions regarding slavery and its role in the Civil War? Yes, next. So say something you've been looking for. I know. So I'm going to give you 5 just for this big chunk paragraph to really read closely, read aggressively, figure out what Douglass is pointing out about society, and answer that question for me. Can we do that?
Yeah.
5 minutes, you're cracking. Some good lines in there. It's Douglass, man. Cannot go wrong. Mm-hmm. What's that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's exactly the reaction I'm looking for. Yeah, that's what we stressed it. Hello, on Monday. We read all the secession documents. So what are they seceding for? Alexander Stevens' cornerstone speech. Our nation founded on the cornerstone of black people are an inferior race. So like, that's what we had to really start that foundational piece of why the South is black majority. You guys have another minute or so left. There's a ton of phenomenal. Luis. Okay, cool. Don't make noise. Seconds. After that, let's finish the test first. So you can read ahead. You can read it up. Yes. Class just on Douglas next semester. No, my grad school program.
Oh, really?
We'll see. Dude, teaching Yale. He's David Light. He's like the foremost Douglas historian. We'll see. Either that or class on Vietnam. Or the American Revolution. That's a good question. I understand. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1. All right. So have a quick chat, please, with your partner or your triad. What is Douglas really getting at? How is he similarizing Douglas, Davis, and Lincoln? What is his big perspective on the war at this point? And what's the big elephant in the room we're ignoring? Take a minute, chat it out, go for it. A really good set. A lot there.
Wow. Right. Where did that go? What did the background sleep? Where does
I would assume their breeding is like the foundation.
Yeah.
Kevin, isn't Davis the president of the Confederacy? Yeah, but like,
Ah, Christoph.
he's not that good. That's like sure about it.
Yeah,
They come off the tree of sleep.
the only reason why they
Ah. What a good, fun conversation. All right. So, I don't need an answer to this specific text question for the conversation piece, but I do need, what is Douglas's big point here? Christoph, you had a really good point. I'm going to pick on you again, because you're hot today. I don't get you in class that often, so I figure, well, I got you. Talk to me, kid.
that basically both of them are like ignoring the problem, like the real problem.
Who's both of them? I don't like them.
Lincoln and Davis.
Good. Talk to me more.
How like they just like they don't like they're ashamed to say what the real reason why the Civil War is even like happening.
Agreed.
Which is like slavery.
Yeah.
Which they keep saying union and union, but like that's not the real reason. The only reason why the Civil War is happening is because of slavery.
How do we know that's true? What have we read that maybe tells us that Christoph is right and Douglas is right? Talk to me. No, not in that text. What do we know that proves him right? Josue.
The text we read on Monday.
What texts were those?
It was
Go ahead.
where the possession document.
Sure, says that?
Yes.
South Carolina told us why. Georgia told us why. Who else told us why?
The other guy.
Yeah, who's Stevens?
Vice president.
Of.
The Confederacy.
Oh, yeah.
So Douglas is like, Lincoln's avoiding it. Union, union, union. Davis is embarrassed by it. what the real cause of the war is, but he's like, why are we beating around the bush, or in this case, the tree? He says northern abolitionists and southern secession are fruits of the same tree. Kevin, what's the tree?
Slavery.
Yeah, yeah. It's the tree of slavery is what has given us abolitionism. Slavery gave us southern secession. Obviously, two very different fruits. Is Douglass right? Yeah. As Lincoln talks about union and now free the slaves. All right. Finish the text because Douglass has a wild proposal. Douglass is a wild proposal. Douglass is going to make a point that I've been making since Jamestown about where slavery comes from. Aha. Douglass and I agree. When I read this, I was like, has he been sitting in my English class? Or have I been sitting in his class? So answer me that. Where does slavery come from according to Douglass? Hint, not a short-term problem. And what does he think we should do about it? I'll give you the same 5 or so to finish. We'll have our discussion, and then we'll look at the ways this and military developments change that.
Everything?
Yeah, read the whole thing. Thank you for clarifying. I was so excited about it. You can't lead a text-based discussion like this without it. It's evident. Mayflower ship, the compact and sign-on, where does that land? The Mayflower compact?
That won't be.
Massachusetts. New England. Good. That's your text. It's like Douglas is giving you a refresher class in colonization. Douglas is first. Oh yeah. Same place. Start me up for 30 minutes and then fall off.
Yeah, basically.
Back to the
Right. I'll just make sure I'll bring the rest. Who is?
the north.
Wait, but then isn't that also kind of, can we say that with the didn't people get upset with that? Because is that kind of like,
Who is he?
I mean, okay.
Read mine history.
Yeah, he wasn't born he's a free state.
He's a radical Republican, and yeah. So he's not mad about it.
It's just like, because
Write your response, don't talk your response. We have a minute 40 left. Where does he place the blame? What is his solution? You're done? Read it again. time.
Sorry.
Right. It looks like you guys are done. So take a good minute, a minute 30 if you will, and talk about this. Where does Douglass place the blame on the development of slavery? It's actually probably from lecture 2.1. What do you think about it? Douglass and I agree. And what is his solution? 90 seconds, chat it out, go for it, talk to me. Go, go, go. You got a lot to say it now. Where's the Mayflower at?
You suggest that slavery from. You suggest that slavery
The Mayflower planted liberty in North. Back to colonization roots, why they came back to wild. So I read this, I was like, man, Douglas has been taking my he's taking my points. Or maybe I'm taking his. Does he not steal my foot out? Why you were some impacts? Yeah, but like it's whole the Mayflower planted liberty in the north, and the ship planted slavery in the south. That's the fire in the gunpowder. That's what creates the explosion. Wild. That was the shit. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. And you're done. So I read this and I get fired up. Because it just gets me really, it's a good text, right? That's why when I was like prepping for this lesson, I was pretty excited about it. Because when I stumble upon a text that really highlights what I'm trying to do, it makes me really happy. So the fact that 2 of you agreed it was a good text makes my day. I'm asleep better. Hey, all right, the 3 of us. We're up to 3. We're up 4. Huh? So, 5. Oh, today's a good day. Today's a good day. It's already a good day. Every Thursday's a good day. Eliam, where does he place the blame for slavery, sir?
The beginning colonization period of America.
Why?
Because the Mayflower landed in Illinois, but there was another ship that landed in the James area.
Okay.
Town area. But there was no one there to stop, prevent it from expanding or growing further.
Good. I think the point he uses is this idea of fire and gunpowder. And this is the point that I stressed to you guys all through period 2. Why you go somewhere impacts what you do when you get there. You entered that since freaking August, had you? Yeah. But he's pointing the same thing out. That in the north, we have this idea of liberty planted. In the south, we have this idea of slavery planted. And we have these 2 very divergent societies that have developed ever since then. I told you the second day of school that you could trace the roots of the Civil War back to colonization. Douglas just did it for us. So I read this and I was like, yes, Douglas. I need this guy taking the A-push test. He'd crush it. Oh yeah. All 5s. So he points out that the explosion comes from the contact between 2 very different societies. Phenomenal point. And a point that we've been trying to prove for all of period 4 and 5. New land?
Same problem.
Yeah, same problem. New problem, new place, same problem. Now, what is Douglas's solution, Kelly? What does Douglas think we should do to solve this problem? Yeah! Let's face the problem and deal with it. Now's our chance. Some of these lines, I read these and get the chills. Seriously. We're fighting the rebels with only one hand. We want to fight them with both. We are striking the guilty rebels with our soft, white hand, when we should be striking with the iron hand of the black man, which we keep chained behind us. God, the visual is just, we have been catching slaves instead of arming them. Even the point I had you stop at earlier. We have sought to bind the chains of slavery in the limbs of black man, without thinking that at last we should find the other end of that hateful chain around our own necks. Like some of these pieces of text, some of these quotes are just so vividly expressive of the situation that America finds itself in. We've tried so hard to put slavery on black people that now the other end of that chain is on our necks. He's proving Jefferson's point. Jefferson said, if there is a God, we will pay for slavery at some point. Jefferson's right. Who else quoted Jefferson? Monday, Alexander Stephens, in his cornerstone speech, from a different perspective. When Stephens says, arguing that all men are created equal was wrong, false. Our country is founded on the exact opposite principle, that the Africans are an inferior race, and they belong in slavery, and our country is going to cement that into our institutions. So we finally see Douglass calling out the idiocy that is a civil war for only union. So you can't fight for union and actually win this war. Good. Good. Nicely done, guys. I know it's a big, chewy text, but you guys did a really good job. So what changes things, again, back to our linkage of military events and the way they impact political developments, is the Battle of Antietam. The Battle of Antietam is the single bloodiest, deadliest day of the entire Civil War. More people died that day than any other day in the conflict. And it is the South's, the Confederacy's, first invasion into the North. Now, I told you on Monday that the big goal of the Confederacy is to fight a war of defense. They're trying to change that. They're going to invade the North. They're going to invade into Maryland. Why Maryland? Because Maryland has a strong slave presence. And Lee and Southern leaders keep thinking that if we can invade the northern states, we can free them from northern control and rule and martial rule. His plan, martial law, is to change public opinion in the North by invading the North. He invades at a place called Antietam. As you can see, it's right over the border from Virginia into Maryland. This is my point on Monday about Maryland being important, because here's Washington, D.C. There's the Confederacy. There's Maryland. So if you lose Maryland, you lose your capital. So this is Lee's big gamble to invade the North at Antietam. And the Union finally wins. The Union finally wins their first significant battle of the war. But they don't really win, they tie. But it's the first time that the Union Army makes the Confederate Army retreat. It's the first time that the Union Army makes the Confederate Army retreat. McClellan's back in charge by now. He's off of his suspension. He's back. And what happens here is Lincoln is able to do what he wanted to do prior, and he's going to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. Let me ask you a question. Why was it important for Lincoln to wait for a victory to issue the Emancipation Proclamation? Why does that matter? What do you guys think? I'll take a volunteer or two. Why? Go ahead, take a shot at it, and then come over here. Okay, the border states are important in the case that it's a Maryland thing. Sure, agreed. Rubes.
He didn't want to seem desperate, because if he had issued it before they won, it would have seemed like they needed the slaves to win, and that the Union wasn't strong enough to win by itself.
Good. Good job. Very nice. Everybody here?
Yeah.
So we needed a win so that Lincoln doesn't look desperate. He's desperately freeing the slaves as the only way he can win the war. So Antietam is that big win. Lee invades the North. He gets pushed back into Confederate territory. And Lincoln takes this win as his opportunity to do what he'd been thinking about in private, in writing, in his journals, in his communication with his cabinet, for at least 4 or 5 months. Now, at this time, McClellan does not chase Lee into the Confederacy when he could have, in theory, pursued him, a retreating Lee, and at least in Lincoln's views, ended the war. So Lincoln gets mad again at McClellan's patience and cautiousness and fires him again. This is for the last time. So now McClellan's been fired twice and he's out of the military for the rest of the war. Because, again, of his cautiousness. But what does it say, back to my original point, that McClellan fought very aggressively in Maryland, but as soon as it came to pursuing them into the South, he's like, we'll slow down.
Doesn't know the territory either.
Yeah, no, he does. I think it says that he's really worried about getting and terrorizing the South because he wants to make sure the institution of slavery is saved. So, we'll talk about the Emancipation Proclamation in a second. This is a very famous picture of Antietam. It just gives you a sense for what Civil War carnage is actually like. Thoughts? Gruesome. Very famous picture. The Civil War is the first war in American history where we have photographs. This is from a very famous photographer named Matthew Brady.
Wait, so that
What's up?
that's real?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh yeah, that's real.
That's not a dog?
No, war photographs become a thing in the Civil War from this guy named Matthew Brady who popularizes wartime photographs. Thoughts?
Is that a dog? What's that? That's a question.
So it really just shows us the way in which carnage is laid out across Civil War battlefields. And I can show you 10,000 pictures just like this. 10,000 pictures like this. So what's significant about the battle is that it's A, the Union's first victory, and B, it allows Lincoln to play the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I have a cartoon for you. Turn your page. Don't worry, it's not the top 10. LM, you don't have to write it down. Not even close to top 5. Maybe top 25. Maybe top 30. They're making fun of me for my love of cartoons. We're not. I've never said top 30 times. That's a lie. So,
You said top 5.
okay. First of all, let me do the counting. Let me do the cartooning. You do the analyzing. Now, I'm sorry I like political cartoons. Deal with it. I'm gonna start sending you guys political cartoons this weekend instead of Henry Clay memes, and you guys will like that too. And be more embarrassed by yourself.
How about both?
So, I'm going to let you talk about this with your partner, but eyes up first, please. This is, any guesses?
Lee?
What? Yeah, it's Angry Lincoln. What's going on?
Lincoln.
Keep in mind how they're portraying him. This is a Confederate soldier. So, take a minute with your partner, because there's not a lot of word clues on this. Usually there's a little more captions and stuff going on that are a little more obvious. Take a minute, try to digest, what is this cartoon getting at? What is it? What point of view might this come from? Whose perspective is this? 1 minute, go. Yeah, you were confused.
I was confused a little bit. He gave me like a Confederate, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Where? I see a sword. Oh,
Why did it say He's mad. Maybe that's like a special.
He did the same thing. I was
Why is he mad?
I can see this person anytime I want to.
All right. So, it's your own fault. That's your own fault. So, Linda, what do you think?
That's not right what they did in the picture.
Well, I'm like thinking that, like, I guess, like the Confederate soldier kind of looks like confident. Like,
Uh-huh.
I heard this from Chris also. He kind of looks confident, and then that Lincoln's just like throwing whatever he can to like win the war.
Oh, okay, you're on the right track. So, what is he throwing?
Spade.
A spade.
A spade?
Come on.
Go.
So with the help of Miss Thompson.
Dr. Thompson. Put some respect on that name. Talk to me. All right, silence.
Of Dr. Thompson.
That's better. Carry on.
He helped me realize that Lincoln doesn't have any other cards, and also the spade is black, so kind of showing how, through the view of a CSA soldier, Lincoln's out of options, and this is his last play.
This is Lincoln's last card, because literally he's played everything else. And this is his last card, and it's the black card. What color are the spades? Luis, if you're gonna that was a good response. If you have something good to add to that,
Yeah.
okay. Let's hear what you have to say.
Alright, so me,
Everyone, listen to Luis. He's gonna drop some wisdom on us.
Alright, so me and Jose were discussing, right? And we said we noticed that the Confederate soldiers all confident and Lincoln is all angry with his last card. Like they both have one card left. And then at the bottom we see gunpowder. And we see that whatever they're playing their cards right. So whoever wins, it would just cause a big explosion. So it was whatever happens, it would change the outcome for everything. And the Confederacy wins.
Yeah. Good. The gunpowder point is legit. I think it's arguing that if Lincoln plays this card, it's going to blow everything up. That's why Lincoln looks almost like a savage. He's not portrayed in a very positive light. So where is this cartoon come from? What perspective? Yeah, a Confederate perspective of Lincoln's only freeing the slaves out of desperation. It's his last hope. It's his last card. See, it is a good cartoon. Maybe I should elevate it to the top 30. Who knows? Nah, it's not even close to top 5, bro. King Jackson's top 5.
Top 50?
The Confederacy going off the cliff on the pigs, that's top 5. Yeah, that's top 5. That's everybody. See, you guys agree. That's everybody's top 5.
Top 100?
King Andrews.
The best part about you guys' jokes is as a student from 2 years ago, I'm sure I've showed you this before, Fernanda Ray. She's fantastic. Ray. I know, but she was an A+ student 2 years ago. Ray. And you were in African studies with her. And she drew this at a boot camp this is an orange juice cup. I've kept it for 2 years, so obviously it matters to me. She finished her orange juice from boot camp, which you'll have next Saturday. And she draws this picture of me with a very big beard. I look great, by the way. I look fantastic. And it's me with a shirt that says A push, and I'm holding the U.S. Constitution. And the caption says, "No, I swear, this one is my favorite political cartoon." So moral of the story, you guys think you're new to this. You guys think you're new to this game, but this game's been going on for a long time. So I'm going to have you read the Emancipation Proclamation, just 2 short parts of it. It does 2 things. I want you to identify both of them. What does the Emancipation Proclamation do times 2? Take 3 minutes, and we'll go from there. She did not, because for her the light didn't really go on until the second semester. She worked her tail off from January on, but think about how much content you missed by not being checked in during the first semester. So she got a 2. She was very upset. But in terms of life lesson learned, incredibly proud of her. Just goes to show, you guys done your A game all year, you can't be sleeping.
No, yeah, this semester is not yours.
No, you're not killing this semester. Get back in that text. It's not even your day. Wednesday lecture for it.
Campus interactive. It's called chunking.
It's called explicit direction.
It's like that's like one of those scaffolds that are in your first.
I mean, your instructional materials are this pretty.
They are pretty. And sequenced.
No, and a line. Mostly pretty. Minute 20. What does he do? There's 2 important things this proclamation does. I need you to be able to identify both of them. Yes, and I don't. About what? He says never mind.
Yeah, never mind.
That's better. you have Salvador today too?
Yeah.
It already happened. How'd it go?
It was really good.
Good.
Alright, I have a question for you. What is the criteria for success and how are students able to
Thesis statement.
and how are able to check? So that's the process of using writing.
Always. Better. Doesn't need a rubric in November then.
Got it.
All right. So 2 things. Take 30 seconds. Talk to your partner. I would like each of you to identify one of them. What are the 2 things this proclamation does? 30 seconds. Go for it.
It says they have to be the military.
That's important.
And they're a condition.
Using the Constitution.
They grade themselves or okay.
I believe that if you write a strong thesis statement, you can write a good essay. So that's the foundation of almost always. All right, we'll stop you guys there. Kat. First, Louis, sit up. You crying? Tears of joy that we freed the slaves? Kat, first thing the proclamation does.
Basically free slaves, not all.
Okay.
Designated states and parts of states.
Good. It frees the slaves that are still in places of rebellion. Question for you. Does Lincoln have any power to free slaves that are still in the Confederacy?
No.
Can he enforce this? No. So does it actually free a single slave? No. Not yet. Second thing that it does, Eliam.
Would you say we accepted free slaves in the military?
Yes, big. That it allows freed slaves and other African Americans to join the military. So now we're going to add this huge labor force that wasn't possible before into the U.S. Army. But think about what this does emotionally, morally, psychologically for black people. Americans have always been super proud of their military. Now, free black people and former slaves can serve in the military. It's a smart military move, but it's also a smart moral and emotional move. Yes, sir.
But wouldn't many other people already living in the North get sort of mad?
Maybe, and this is when, we talked about Monday, this is when New York City has their big draft riots. Because they're like, wait a second, this war was for union, not slavery. But they're going to get over it pretty quickly. And that demonstrates my point about how this evolves over time. So, eyes up to the board real quick. All these Confederate states, that's where slavery is abolished. The border states that have slavery, is it touched there? No, because those states aren't in rebellion. So the slaves that are still in the Union are kept as slaves. But keep in mind, from our lecture last Thursday, our Upper South has very little slavery in the first place. We can't allow them to be upset. The border states keep their slaves until the 13th Amendment is passed in 1865, which ends slavery forever. And then slavery is abolished across the entire nation. So big picture, what this does, again, my point about military events impacting politics, it keeps Great Britain out of the war. The British, at this point, are ready to get involved and mediate, which means negotiate for two sides, as a middle person, peace between the two sides. The British are ready to come and make sure the two sides just peacefully separate. That's a big deal. What do the British want? They want their cotton, they want it now. So it's important we understand that now the war is about bigger than just union. Now the war is about slavery. What was that book about slavery that was kind of important? Anybody? I heard it. Uncle Tom's Cabin. Guess where that was a bestseller? In Britain. So all the public opinion in England is against slavery. So now England's like, shit, we can't get involved because our people are very anti-American slavery. We can't get involved on behalf of the South. So it's a very smart military move, even though it's a political move. It keeps Britain from siding with the South, keeps Britain from becoming an ally, and now it changes the war to a war to abolish slavery. a war to destroy the South's economic institution, and a war to preserve the Union as well. It also destroys any chance of there being a negotiated settlement. These peace Democrats are negotiating. At this point, now the South will never negotiate with Lincoln. He's crossed the line in their mind. Yeah, zero diplomacy left. Good point. Lincoln says, on the day that this is issued, the character of the war has been changed. The war is now a war about subjugation. The Old South will die. The Old South will die. So, in Lincoln's own words, it does in fact change the nature and the view of the war. As you can see, the perspective on Lincoln and the Emancipation Proclamation is not great.
King Jackson.
Not quite.
Junior.
Thoughts? Take a look. What is this peace propaganda implying? This is early fake news. Yeah, Abraham Africanus, his secret life. That Lincoln must only be freeing the slaves because he is part black. Otherwise, what possible motivation would he have? Yeah, in a sense. In a sense. So, to your point, Santos, this is not incredibly well received by the North. But again, they're trying to win the war, so.
Well, I meant it, I guess, in a job aspect, because like, yeoman farmers couldn't really expand westward because of slaves, so what about...
Oh, they can. Why?
Oh, yeah, but before that.
The Homestead Act.
Yeah, but like...
Well, this happens after the Homestead Act.
Yeah, like, but people already working in, like, factories up north, like, wouldn't they have competition?
That'll be a bigger fear after the war. But right now, the focus is on how to win the war, and it's very important militarily. So, keep in mind that this idea of slavery is controversial. The border states are slave states. He wants to keep them. Also, slavery is constitutional. Slavery is constitutional. Roger Taney said so, and Dred Scott. The North, to Kevin's point, is incredibly racist. The Democrats think this is too much federal government involvement, so it's controversial. But we start actually doing these things before the Emancipation Proclamation. 2 acts are passed called the Confiscation Acts, which says, well, if a slave escapes and comes to the Union Army, we shouldn't return that slave because it's an article of war. They might support the war effort, so we'll just keep them. So this is just an evolvement of what's happening previously in the war. The Emancipation Proclamation does, in fact, free slaves in Confederate states, and it changes the cause of the war. We do see some very important military units made up out of slaves. Anybody ever seen the movie Glory? No, it's about the 54th Regiment of Massachusetts, of a free black regiment fighting the war. Eventually, 200,000 black people serve in the war. 200,000 African Americans are going to serve in the war effort, and they play a huge role in the win. Like I told you earlier, eventually the 13th Amendment is passed, ending slavery forever. But I want to point you to this quote from this general from Georgia in the Confederate Army. He says, once the Union starts arming black people, he says, well, if slaves make good soldiers, our whole theory of slavery is wrong. Which is true. If slaves make good soldiers, then their whole theory about slaves are unruly, they're unorganized, they don't have intelligence, that's all, they're not human, they're an inferior race. He says, yeah. He says, well, hell, if slaves make good soldiers, our whole theory of slavery is wrong. Yeah. This shows you all the battles that African Americans helped support in, either in action or by being as part of the regiments that support the war effort, infrastructure-wise or elsewhere. Check it out. And how much? Bless you. How much must this suck for the South? To have African Americans fighting the war to end Southern independence. Yes.
I read the Civil War book back in elementary.
Cool. Elementary school doesn't matter now. So the next thing that really matters is the Battle of Gettysburg. The Battle of Gettysburg is going to put Lincoln on this continuity from the Emancipation Proclamation. What about it later? The Battle of Gettysburg is going to be significant for 2 reasons. Reason 1, it's the second and last time that the South invades the North. It's the last time. The first time was Antietam. It's the last time that the Confederacy is going to invade the Union. It's a 3-day battle, and it's the bloodiest, deadliest battle of the Civil War. It goes on for 3 days, and it really demonstrates that the Confederacy is hemorrhaging people. The Union can replace their losses. They have more people. They have more industrial. They have more infrastructure. The Confederacy's having a much harder time replacing the people in a very 3-day deadly battle. It's very ugly. It's very terrible. The Confederacy realizes they can't continue to replace large losses of soldiers. It's the last time Lee's going to invade the North, and it is, in fact, the high point of the Confederacy. What do I mean by that, the high point? No. What? Yeah, it's the farthest north that the Confederate Army gets. It's the farthest into the United States of America that the Confederates get. And while the battle is important, what's actually more important is the Gettysburg Address, which comes afterwards. Lincoln goes to Gettysburg to dedicate a cemetery to all the fallen soldiers, and he makes a speech that really pleads with Americans to kind of change the way they're looking at this war. To plead with Americans. And we're going to read it right now. It's a very short speech, but you're actually going to listen to it from this phenomenal. So the text is in front of you. There's a picture of a painting of Lincoln at Gettysburg.
Stop it.
Lincoln.
Lincoln?
Lincoln, not Lincoln. Lincoln. Guys, still a lot to get to. All right, so they're going to do a little introduction. They're going to do a little introduction, and then they're going to, the narrator is going to read it. So when he starts reading it, follow along in your text. It's from a really good documentary series that I told you about. That's a New Birth of Freedom.
The Civil War was fought in 10,000 places. At Big Bend, Big Sandy, and the Big Sunflower River. From Bunker Hill, West Virginia, and Blue Springs, Tennessee, and Cairo, Illinois, to Golgotha Church, Georgia, and Christiansburg, Kentucky. At Citrus Point on the Cimarron River, and along Cowskin Bottom. At Pebbly Run and La Glorieta Pass, and Gettysburg.
I think if I had my choice of all the moments to be present at it in that war period, it would be at Gettysburg during Lincoln's delivery of his speech. Maybe to have seen it craft those beautiful words, those marvelous healing words, and then deliver them. They were for everyone, for all time. They subsumed the entire war and all in it. It showed his compassion for everyone, his love for his people. That's where I'd like to be.
On November 19th, Lincoln traveled to Gettysburg to dedicate the new Union Cemetery. The featured speaker was Edward Everett of Massachusetts, a diplomat, clergyman, and celebrated orator. The president had been invited almost as an afterthought to offer a few appropriate remarks. Everett spoke for not quite 2 hours. Then Lincoln rose. A local photographer took his time focusing. Presumably, the president could be counted on to go on for a while. But he spoke just 269 words. He started off by reminding his audience that just 87 years had passed since the founding of the nation. And then he went on to embolden the Union cause with some of the most stirring words ever spoken. Lincoln was heading back to his seat before the photographer could open the shutter. He felt that he had failed, that it was a poor speech, that the people didn't like it. It was so brief, less than 2 minutes. He felt that he had failed. Lehman, his friend Ward Lehman, was sitting next to him on the stand. When he sat down, there was just a sprinkling of applause. And he said, "Lehman, that speech won't scowl. That's what you say about a plow in the prairies when the mud doesn't come off it."
The cheek of every American must tingle with shame as he reads the silly, flat, dishwatery utterances of the man who has to be pointed out to intelligent foreigners as the President of the United States. Chicago Times.
Dear Mr. President, I should be glad if I could flatter myself
that I came as near to the central idea of the occasion in 2 hours as you did in 2 minutes. Edward Everett.
Fourscore-and-7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met here on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that their nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
All right. So,
How did they think that was a fast speech? It was nice.
it's because people thought he didn't speak long enough. He didn't have enough to say. The guy before him spoke for 2 hours. I told you these guys can talk. So, but what I want to point out to you in this speech is that idea of how many years ago? 87 years ago, our country's founded on this idea of freedom. And then he points out that it's time for what? No, use your text. It's time for a new birth of freedom. That freedom needs to be reborn with a new definition of freedom. What might that include? Yeah, ending slavery. So we go from the Emancipation Proclamation to this big Gettysburg battle that at this point the South is retreating, things have changed, and Lincoln is bold enough to ask America to consider a new birth of freedom. A new change in the way we look at what freedom is. Who's free? What society deems freedom. And it's our job to honor our founding fathers' legacies and those soldiers that died here to ensure that our country maintains an example of government by the people, for all people. It's a big speech, a big turning point, and for such a short speech, it has lasting consequences. Lasting consequences. But at the same exact time as the Battle of Gettysburg, far less people are paying attention, because nobody pays attention to the Western Front. The siege of Vicksburg is complete. Vicksburg is this last little Confederate holding on the Mississippi River. It's the last big fort that is held by the Confederacy. And with the siege of Vicksburg complete, the Union Army has full, unfettered access to the Mississippi River. What this does is it cuts the Confederacy in two. You got this part of the Confederacy, which is separated from the other part by the Mississippi River, and they're kind of isolated. And these guys are isolated, and then you can focus on that Anaconda Planet idea of squeezing in from the Mississippi River. So Vicksburg is important because it gives the Union control of the entire river, and it splits the Confederacy as well. Big, important, and it happens the exact same days, basically. It ends the same day as the Battle of Gettysburg does. So bang, bang, both back to back. Show the last invasion of the North is over, and the Confederacy is split in two by the Mississippi River. Good. So back to our earlier map, in a sense. 1863 sees some really important victories for the Union, specifically Vicksburg and specifically Gettysburg. There's other ones as well. Check it out. By 1863, the Union Army controls everything outside of this. By the end of 1863. So all the rest of this is controlled by the Union Army. Do you guys think this is going well? Yeah, not bad. However, domestically speaking, there's a huge chunk of the population that thinks the war should end because of the slavery issue and because of the length issue. These peace Democrats, they're going to make a real big push in 1863 and 1864 to end Lincoln's presidency and take over the White House. These peace Democrats are emboldened by the Emancipation Proclamation. These peace Democrats are like, this is not what the country should be fighting for. The federal government shouldn't regulate slavery. They're very anti-emancipation. And they want to just end the war immediately. They want to say, let's just stop the war. We can negotiate with the South. Maybe we can bring them back in. Maybe we can't. But we should stop the war ASAP. It's gone on long enough. People have died long enough. I'm not willing to send my sons to die for a war for slavery. Let's just call it a day. So there's this huge chunk in society, as I ask about, that the war has gone too slow, the war is taking too long, you're 2 questions behind, and we need to be doing more to just end the war. So they're going to nominate our good friend, he's back, George McClellan, as their candidate for the president in 1864. So now McClellan gets to run as president against the guy who fired him twice. It's kind of cool. He's going to get his revenge. So take a look at this cartoon, if you could be so kind. Take a minute with your partner. Who is this guy? Lincoln. And he's saying no peace without abolition. Who is this guy? Davis. And he's saying no peace without separation. And then here is our good friend McClellan saying the Union must be preserved at all costs, laments, efforts. So take a minute. Answer the question for what does this cartoon demonstrate about politics and Civil War? From whose perspective is this drawn? 1 minute, chat it out, answer the question for me, and then we'll finish strong. Go for it. Yes. That's why you should keep him awake. Hit him in the back of the head. His energy at lunch will play basketball, but it's just the way he lines his priorities up. We can't stop that, you know. I don't care how good you are at basketball. It means 0% to my life. 0%. You don't mean 0%, but your basketball skills mean literally less than nothing to me. No, literally less than nothing. Yeah, like if you fell on the face of the earth.
So I'm just another student that you're just going to have throughout the year.
Less. So, I like most of my students. So, let's look at this cartoon, and then we can finish strong. Shaylee, what do you think? What is this cartoon trying to say about McClellan? Yeah. He's going to be the one that's going to keep the Union together. Then obviously he's not willing to compromise, because he won't give in without abolition. He won't compromise, but it'll be McClellan who can put everything together and save the day. So whose perspective is this from? Yeah, the Peace Democrat, the McClellan wing of the Democrat Party point of view. Good. So we have our election in 1864, which some people actually discuss postponing, because it's kind of hard to have an election in the middle of a war against yourself. We have Lincoln on the Republican ticket. We have McClellan on the Democratic ticket. And really the ideology looks like this. The Northern Democrats have the Copperheads, the peace Democrats kind of together and the war Democrats, and the Republicans just have the Republicans. Now, who can the Republicans attract to win the election? The war Democrats, right? If McClellan's running on a platform of ending the war, and you think that these guys want to keep the war going to end the Civil War, but then it all depends on how the war goes. If the war's going badly, who wins the election? What do you guys think? Who wins the election? McClellan. If the war's going good, Brenda, who wins? The Republicans. Good. So the war will impact the election greatly. This is my point. That if the war goes south, no pun intended, then that favors the Democrats. If the war goes into the South, effectively, that'll favor the Republicans. So this all changes post-Vicksburg. I'll go to my map over here for you guys. Here's Vicksburg. Now the Union has the whole Mississippi River. Now they can invade this way, and this way, and this way, and make life living hell on the Confederacy, which is exactly what happens. General William Tecumseh Sherman, good name to know for the next couple weeks, is in charge of, from Vicksburg into the Confederacy, invading the South. Now, Sherman is a racist. Sherman does not like black people. But Sherman is also anti-slavery. It can be both. You can not like black people and believe that slavery is wrong. But what Sherman hates the most is disloyalty. Sherman dislikes the most is the fact that the South has brought us into this long, drawn-out war because of their desire to keep slavery. So Sherman's going to take all of his anger, and all of the North's anger, and all of everybody's anger, he's going to take that anger out on the South. He's going to take his troops through the entirety of the South. I can show you how. Let's take a look at the map. You can see, there they go. This wide swath of land is what's happening all through 1864 before the election. This invasion from Vicksburg, which we just captured in 1863, is going to come through the entirety of the South. And look how wide it is. Did it need to be that wide? Probably not. What he's doing with this much width is literally burning everything in his tracks. Tracks, railroad tracks. Huh. Burning every possible Confederate building. Ripping up every railroad track. Burning every...
plantation.
What's that?
Plantation.
Burning every plantation. Burning every farm that might grow food that supports the South. Burning every factory that might supply the South war effort. He's literally inflicting terror on the South. With 6,000 troops, he cuts a 60-mile wide. 60 miles is really far. It's like here to Rancho Cucamonga. Far, far. Riverside. You see Riverside? Super far away. From here to there, that wide, literally lighting everything in the South on fire on his way. All through Georgia. He gets to Atlanta, one of the last big industrial cities of the South, and he literally burns the city of Atlanta to the ground. And he says to Lincoln, I got you Atlanta as a Christmas present. All of a sudden the war is going differently. His big goal is to do two things. To ruin all possibility of supply for the Confederate Army, and to weaken morale. You can't win a war without public support. To kill public support in the South. Because now the war is in their backyards, literally. It is in their cities, it is in their towns, it is on their plantations. As he's going, he is freeing slaves on the way and leaving the South in utter ruins. So much for that McClellan approach of using a light hand on the South. He's like, no. We should have yeah. Now, Sherman is this early practitioner of total war. Sherman is still a bad word in the South. The South still despises William Tecumseh Sherman. His success in Shermanizing the South is shown by how many soldiers in the Confederate Army that are further north leave. Confederate soldiers are